When the first Emirati astronaut looks down at Earth from the International Space Station, he will see his homeland, the United Arab Emirates, a land made up of jagged mountains and great sweeps of sand. Since ancient times, the Bedouins used the stars to guide their journeys through the desert. In the 21st century, their descendants are looking up at the skies on a new pioneering journey. This time, into deep space.
Roger and roll, Columbia. 103. Over second stage.
It is the beginning of winter in Russia. Two Emirati astronauts have begun their intensive training at the Yuri Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center to prepare for space. They are learning how to manage life in microgravity. After vigorous training for more than 5 months in Russia, the astronauts return home.
هي كان هزاي مصير يحب يطالع النجوم ويحب النجوم في الليل، يطالع النجوم في الليل، يطلع في العرقوب يطالع النجوم. احنا كنا هني في اليوا ساكنين، ويطالع يعني الفضاء ويقول انا بصير الفضاء والفضاء ما نعرف شو الفضاء. نحن انا اقول له يا ولدي الفضاء هذا كل اليوم فاضي، يصير فيه تشوف لك جو مكان فاضي وراح. يقول لي لا مش هذا الفضاء انت اللي تطرينه، هذا الفضاء غير اللي انا بصير له.
Who would have believed that a young boy growing up in a small desert town would one day have his name etched in history as the first Emirati astronaut? For many years, Hazzaa AlMansoori served his country as a military pilot.
For me, a passion to start from the childhood, from the desert in Biwa. I was looking to the stars and thinking that, can I be an astronaut? At that age, I thought it's impossible to reach the stars or to be an astronaut. So this dream is always was with me all my life.
Who would have ever guessed that another Emirati man who grew up in the Ghaffar Mountains in Al Ain would one day train to represent the UAE in space?
I always had that question in my mind, what's beyond the Earth atmosphere, what's there? And I used to read a lot about the people who are traveling into space, called astronauts, people who already reached the moon. And at that early stage, I couldn't imagine myself being someone like them.
In 2018, Sultan al-Neyadi's dreams to be an astronaut became real when he was shortlisted to be part of the UAE's astronaut program. He is scheduled to be the second Emirati astronaut to blast off into space. Dreaming of becoming an astronaut is now a reality in the United Arab Emirates.
You know, the UAE has a big footprint in terms of space. We are a developing space nation, and looking at the importance of space in the next 20 years, you know, there are concepts of getting to the moon, going back to the moon, going to Mars, asteroid mining and resource utilization in space. These are areas that the UAE is very much interested in, and you know, you have to have a strong, solid base here at home to be able to even be thinking about participating in those things in the next 20 years.
For over a decade, the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center has embarked on an intensive journey. Their mission is to develop the space capabilities of the nation. Their ambitions and knowledge will take them through 600 million kilometers of deep space to reach and orbit Mars.
So Mars is difficult, Mars is hard. 50% of the missions that have been sent to Mars have failed. And there's a lot of set of challenges that we have to think about.
Mars, the fourth rock from the Sun, remains an enigma. The more we investigate, the more questions arise. Now, a young nation will attempt to shed light on the many mysteries of the Red Planet.
The country is only 50 years old, but we are sending a mission to Mars. We have astronauts and we're building our own projects. So the inspiration that people got throughout the Apollo era in the 60s is now happening. This is our Apollo era.
By 2021, Hope, an unmanned probe about the size of a small car, will be cruising to the Red Planet, using the stars to track its direction, to reach Mars within 7 months.
For the first time, the international community will be, and the science community around the world will be able to receive a holistic view of the Martian atmosphere at different times of the day, at different seasons. So the first time, the science community will be able to get this kind of data about the relationship between the lower atmosphere and the upper atmosphere of Mars, and the escape rates of hydrogen and oxygen from that.
MBRSC is responsible for the execution and supervision of all stages of the design, development and launch of the Hope probe in 2020. The UAE Space Agency is funding and supervising procedures and necessary details for the implementation of this project.
For hundreds of years, our ancestors lived and studied stars. Many of the stars are having Arabic names. We are just a continuation of what our ancestors started. So we're aiming to go there and to send that positive message for the whole nation and to raise the UAE flag on board the International Space Station. So I think we're ambassadors at this point, and we hope to do it perfectly, and we accomplish the mission.
To be a supersonic jet pilot is to fly faster than the speed of sound. An F-16 pilot has the power to pull a jet in a vertical climb and rise above the clouds in minutes.
If you go back in history of astronauts, most of them, because of their skill set as a pilot, they get an advantage.
We had over 4,000 people applying to the program in about 3.5 months.
The first UAE Astronaut program, funded by the ICT Fund of the Telecommunication Regulatory Authority, was launched in December 2017 and began with a nationwide search.
We looked at their capabilities in physics, in math, in science, and technology, their knowledge about space. And that process obviously took us from 4,022 applicants down to about 400. Then we had another process that took us down to the top 95, who then went through a grueling medical process, and we got the top 39 who had completed the medical process, who were ready to go to the one-on-one interviews.
Most of the tests I went through, like the pressure chamber and the heat, was one of the things that I gained from my previous career as a pilot.
The final 9 candidates undergo extensive examinations specific to space missions to test their levels of endurance and prepare them for the extreme conditions in space.
The spinning chair was one of the interesting tests I went through. It really was spinning us for 10 minutes to check our ability to resist the stickness motions and these stuff.
So I've practiced jiu-jitsu for almost 7 years now, and I think it helped me a lot. So one of the things that I found Jiu-Jitsu useful, during the test we've done the centrifuge. So you have 8 times your weight sitting on your chest. So it's similar to the Jiu-Jitsu game when you have an opponent having a side control or he's in mount position. So I felt during the centrifuge, I felt like I'm in a Jiu-Jitsu fight and I'm struggling to probably survive that person who's on top of my chest. And luckily I was able to accomplish the 2 centrifuge runs with no problems. So I think Jiu-Jitsu really helped me overcoming the centrifuge experience.
Finally, out of 4,022 hopefuls, the names of the first Emirati astronauts are revealed to the nation. Hazzaa and Sultan fly immediately to Russia to prepare to meet the future challenges of space. October 29th, 2018, in Japan, another dream is about to ascend into space. A nation holds its breath as they witness the final countdown of their first homemade satellite. This marks the beginning of a new journey. The KhalifaSat story began more than 12 years ago in Dubai.
One guy called me once and said, Amr, now you're back. How about you join somewhere new? It's a new challenge for Dubai and the UAE. It's never been done before. And all I can say is that you will be working in something related to space.
In 2006, the United Arab Emirates took the first steps to build their very own space program. A small team traveled to South Korea to acquire the necessary skills and knowledge.
For me, it felt like home at the beginning because they know it's like people moving to a new location, they all kind of feel homesick. I did feel that a bit, but then when I got used to Korea, it became like my second home.
The first Emirati engineers had to face many unforeseen challenges, like speaking the Korean language and exploring a new cuisine. The idea was that the Emirati team would soak up as much knowledge as possible and learn how to build an Earth observation satellite unassisted.
And then we lived as a family, actually. We understand each other, we worked together. And then we had one goal, bring this technology and then build the first satellite in UAE.
It took many years of experience and mistakes, sacrifice and determination.
We used to live there as a small group, working together. We were engineers, but at the same time we were brothers. We met each other at work as engineers, and then we went back home together as brothers.
By 2013, 2 low Earth orbiting satellites had been constructed, launched and deployed into orbit. Now the Emirati team had learnt enough to do it on their own.
We are ready actually to make it in UAE. So the team moved in 2014 and starting all the integration of the KhalifaSat here in UAE. And we opened the clean room.
70 engineers began work on KhalifaSat in the clean rooms of the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. This was to be a very small satellite, measuring 3.3 meters in diameter, with a very advanced camera system and 512 gigabits of memory.
For example here, those are the solar panels. So our software just makes sure that our satellite is always facing the sun. That's where we're getting our power from. And then those power that we get will be stored in the battery.
After doing all the environmental tests, the satellite was now ready to be launched. KhalifaSat was heading for Japan.
It went from airplanes to a truck to a boat, and all of this is done over 4 days, and until it reached Japan, the Tanegashima Space Center.
On the 16th September 2018, KhalifaSat arrived at Tanegashima, Japan. This idyllic island is Japan's largest rocket launch complex and home to its space program. In Tanegashima, you can't forget about space. There appears to be a rocket lurking around every corner. This is a space town for serious space junkies, with spacecraft and space art squeezed into every street. The KhalifaSat engineering team arrive on the island to prepare their satellite for the final journey. Their job is to prepare for the launch, to manage and do all the functional testing on the ground. They were all pretty nervous, with a lot riding on this launch.
We're very excited to go there, to see, to make sure that the satellite arrives safely.
It is one day before the launch, and the team wake up to a perfect morning in Tanegashima.
أخواني وأخواتي وصلنا لمرحلة مهمة في مشروعنا.
Amr gives an emotional speech to his team. He tells them how proud he is of their achievements, their determination, and their spirit of tenacity.
All the team walked to the launch facility. We call it Vehicle Assembly Building, VAB. And from there, we saw first time the rocket in front of us.
All our hopes were now put on this launch. And it was the last time we actually can feel the satellite in presence next to us, because the next day it will just fly to space. It was a moment of saying goodbye to the satellite, but at the same time waiting for it to go to its intended life, which is orbiting in space.
The feeling, it cannot be described. And we were saying, okay, we're building a satellite. It's very tiny in front of it. And then it's inside there, our baby.
So the next day, on the day of the launch itself, the team was waiting, and the countdown starts, and you look at it, and it's a few hours, and then it's 2 hours, and then it's 1 hour.
5 time zones away, in the control rooms of the MBRSC of Dubai, the engineering team waits anxiously to track the progress of the satellite.
Back in Japan, we are all there, and we are all waiting for this moment to succeed.
Countdowns happen. 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes.
Everybody celebrated the launch, but still everybody was waiting. Are we gonna have the first signal from the satellite? We received the first signal, and all the numbers on our screens started to change, giving the realistic numbers from the satellite. It was a great moment. When you look at the numbers changing, and you look at them and see they are the right numbers. So the solar panels were successfully deployed. The satellite was pointing these solar panels to the sun, and everything was perfect. It was a perfect moment for us. Everybody started jumping, everybody started clapping, and everybody was happy that we received the first signal, but we received it with this joy that everything went as smooth and as perfect as it could be.
Deep in a forest wilderness in Russia, the astronauts are taking the next steps on their journey into space. They are learning skills to survive an off-course landing. Training for space is tough, but the astronauts are determined. Their ancestors once looked up to the stars and space to guide them. Hundreds of years later, they are looking up to the skies once again.